Welcome, everybody. My name is Savlan Hauser. I'm the Executive Director of the Jack London Improvement District. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to the beautification and promotion of Jack London as a fabulous place to live, work, and play. We have a board member in the audience, too, Paul. Everybody knows Paul already. I won't make him raise his hand. But tonight, this is one of our panel talks in a series of panel talks we do. We start hearing from the neighborhood about issues of interest to you. And we host panel talks about them as an opportunity to discuss and engage and learn from experts in the field. Tonight, scooters. This is a scooter summit. Scooters have come to Oakland kind of all of a sudden, and people have picked them right up. Sorry about that. It was a little loud. People have jumped right on them, and we see a lot of scooter use. People seem to have developed opinions about them just as quickly as the scooters have arrived on our streets. And so this is a really fun time and opportunity to talk about them. The other thing that is making this panel talk timely is the City of Oakland is considering regulations, of course. And it's on recess right now. They already this City Council did their first reading of a set of regulations that could apply to the scooters. And the second reading could be as soon as the first part of September. So this is a really timely conversation. I'll introduce our panelists. We have moderating the panel, we have Corey Weinberg of The Information, formerly of San Francisco Business Times. Marlo Sandler is a panelist from Bird Scooters. She is the senior manager of government relations, but comes from the world of city planning after having served in the public sector for years in San Francisco. We have Dave Campbell, Advocacy Director at Bike East Bay and champion for all things uncar. Is that fair? Evie Ellington is the general manager at Lime Bike, but has previously served stints in car share operations at Zipcar and was an appointee to the U.S. Department of Transportation before coming to Lime Bike. We have Kerby Olsen, who is in the way he's representing the Department of Transportation tonight, and he has been really the driving force behind the regulations and figuring out how to implement scooter and dockless mobility in Oakland. Is that fair to say? Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm going to hand over the mic to Corey.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Cool. Thanks so much, Savlan, for having me, for having us. She mentioned this is a really timely conversation. Just quickly, I just wanted to zoom out to provide a tiny bit of context, because as Savlan mentioned, this is a relatively recent innovation, and we've only recently seen scooters hit the streets of Oakland and the rest of the Bay Area. But scooters, these little toy-like devices that bring people from half mile to 2 miles around the city, they've catapulted Bird and Lime to two of the fastest rising tech companies of today's era. They are the quote-unquote new disruptors of cities. And it's really interesting to have conversations like these tonight because their future depends largely on what do cities think of them? What do residents think of them? So I'm going to ask them a few questions. I'm going to ask sort of the whole panel a few questions, and then we're going to get to your questions because I think this is a really important conversation that we didn't really have in the early days of Uber, Lyft, and Airbnb.
I'm going to jump in with one quick announcement. I'll be passing out cards if any of you have questions and collecting them as we go and handing them to Corey so that he can be seeing what questions come up as we go through the conversation.
Yes, think of your questions. I don't want you to walk away tonight without your question being answered. And I wanted to first just kind of go down the line to have each panelist briefly, 1 to 2 minutes, sort of expand upon their role in sort of the scooter ecosystem and sort of to talk a little bit about the right way forward for cities and scooters to work together as you see it, as briefly as you can, and then I'll dive into more specific questions.
All right. Do I need to move this closer? Can you hear me? So my name is Marlo Sandler, and I'm the Government Relations Manager for BIRD here in Northern California. And I'm a city planner by training, and I chose to work at BIRD because BIRD is all about getting cars off the road. And in doing so, we are reducing congestion and carbon emissions, all of which make cities happier and healthier places to be. Probably the most fun part about my job is that I get to collaborate with cities around the country, identifying their last mile transportation challenges, and then offering a solution that is affordable, reliable, and frankly, pretty fun. It seems like most people here have ridden scooters before, and you can't deny the fun factor. So BIRD's been operating in Oakland now for about 2 months, and during that time, we've worked really closely with elected officials, with city staff, and community stakeholder groups, and we're really interested in helping shape a regulatory framework that works best for the city of Oakland. During that time, we've spent quite a bit of time in the community doing helmet giveaways, supporting neighborhood events, and seeking input and feedback from residents, stakeholders, everyone in Oakland to best understand how to help shape a program that will help be successful in Oakland in, again, solving for that last mile transportation needs and just getting people out of cars. We're really, really interested in getting feedback tonight, and I'm happy to be here to have this conversation not only about scooters, but about the larger shared mobility space in Oakland. And thank you for having me.
Dave?
Dave Campbell, Advocacy Director with Bike East Bay. We do walking and biking advocacy in the East Bay, Alameda, Contra Costa counties. And as the Advocacy Director, largely I'm working on getting bike lanes on the street in various cities throughout the East Bay. And so bike lanes are, I think, where we want the scooters to be, in the bike lane. And if there's a lot of scooters in the bike lane, we need to widen the bike lane. And that's why I like scooters. I see a lot of potential of getting more people on the scooters and any other sort of new mobility devices, human-sized mobility devices, because that's going to build clout for more bike lanes. So I'm a fan. Bike East Bay, we're still kind of figuring out our organizational position on all the details of how this is going to work. But as the director, I'm pushing for more of these things. And I'll just throw it out there. It may not be something everybody wants to hear, but in my opinion, I think more scooters on the street, as crazy as they are, maybe someone's gotten hurt, and maybe some people don't like it, scooters are making streets safer for everybody. So let's have that conversation tonight.
Evie?
Hi, I'm Evie Ellington. I'm the General Manager for Lime Bike Bay Area. I've been at Lime for just about a year now. Before my General Manager position, I was the Operations Manager in San Jose, where I actually launched the first scooter pilot for our company. And for me, having been in the car sharing world as well as working at the USDOT, something that is deeply personal is providing equity and access. Transit isn't just getting from point A to B. Transit is a part of everything we do. And it's really important for me personally, as well as our company, to hire locally, which we do with our operations team, unlike other scooter sharing or multimodal bike sharing companies, and as well as working with communities with Marshawn Lynch, Beast Mode, and Bike East Bay. We recently participated in their Pedal Fest. For us, speaking with how we work with government in the future, I think equity in providing things like our Lime Access program, which allows discounted rides for people who qualify for lower income programs, is a way that we'd like to work with the government, and we welcome any feedback.
Kerby?
Thanks. So I'm Kerby Olsen. I'm the Shared Mobility Coordinator for the City of Oakland in the Department of Transportation. I'm also a little sick. I'm coming down with something, so I apologize if I'm a little sniffly or seem low energy.
Are you being overworked by all the scooters that have come into the city?
I am, yes.
Yeah.
So the Department of Transportation is a new department. We just had our 2-year, our second birthday recently. And our work is guided by citywide policies as well as our strategic plan. So in our strategic plan, one of our key goals is to reduce Oaklanders' transportation costs. And scooters are generally an affordable option for transportation, so that's something we're excited about. We also look to increase access to different modes of transportation and shared mobility modes. So this is another way of meeting our citywide goals and our strategic plan goals. And also, one one interesting fact is that 50% of car trips are under, I believe it is 3 miles. So that's sort of right in the sweet spot of scooters. So they really have the potential to divert car trips onto a more sustainable mode. At the same time, there are a lot of concerns that are legitimate, and so with the legislation that we've proposed, we're looking to address those concerns, but also allow these services for the benefits they provide.
Kerby, I want to start with my first question for you. As we've heard, everyone from Marshawn Lynch loves scooters, but there's always issues, as you mentioned, that kind of comes up when we talk about actually how do we regulate these vehicles. And usually the two biggest issues are typically where to ride them and where to park them, I think. You're not supposed to ride them in the street, you're supposed to ride them in the street or the bike lane, not on the sidewalk. You're supposed to park them on the sidewalk, but not block any curb ramps or driveways. That doesn't always happen, and the companies try to make sure they do user education to make sure it does happen. But Kerby, what is the state of play right now in Oakland? Are you seeing the problems I just talked about? Are they actual problems that residents are coming face to face with? And how are you looking to create a system that sort of puts enforcements and regulations on these vehicles?
Yeah, they're real problems. I mean, I think, what percentage of scooters are parked improperly, we don't exactly know, but in Seattle, for example, when they looked at dockless bike share, they did find the majority of the dockless bikes were parked properly. As far as people riding improperly, yeah, that's definitely a real issue. I think that there is a fairly low level of information out there right now about where you're supposed to use these devices. And so that's a key part of our legislation, is to make sure that both we work with the operators, we work with business improvement districts, we work with as many stakeholders as we can find and that are willing to help in this effort to really get the information out there about, yes, you're supposed to be in the bike lane, you're supposed to park it properly. And then there's also opportunities for making that more clear in our public right-of-way with signage or designated parking areas or similar things. And then as far as how are we trying to get a handle on it, I think one of the key ways that we're going to do that is with the data that the operators provide to us about, where the scooters are being parked. And so, yeah, that's our primary sort of mode of dealing with it at the moment.
Gotcha. Marlo and Evie, an interesting, I think, topic for our audience tonight is the question of how do Bird and Lime work with merchants, retailers, sort of neighborhood groups as a whole. I feel like one interesting sort of development in these systems of dockless scooter sharing is while you don't have docks like the Ford Go Bike systems do, you are looking for ways to create some sort of network. Could maybe Evie talk about sort of what Lime is doing with sort of retail or merchant partnerships in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. We have Lime hubs in every city, in every market we operate in.
What is a Lime hub?
A Lime hub is a local business partner that we have developed a relationship with, and we are allowed to park our scooters there or deploy them. And it's a place where anyone in the community can always go to and find a scooter, as well as, we work with these local businesses to bring them customers and to kind of drive the revenue and sales.
How do you do that?
By doing things like scooter crawls. You can ride a scooter from different shops and experiencing the city. And also, for instance, a lot of work we've done with Beast Mode and Marshawn Lynch. We did a scooter ride with Marshawn and SE bikes here, with scraper bikes, which are really a big part of the Oakland community. And it ended at Oakland Tech, and kind of just trying to be a part of the community and businesses and bring them, these resources that we have on our end.
Marlo, does Bird have a similar approach? Do you have any sort of distinctive ways that you work with merchants, retailers, sort of neighborhood residents in order to park these vehicles?
Sure. Well, when we first started operating in a city, as we did in Oakland about 2 months ago, we spent a ton of time out in the communities, in the neighborhoods, meeting with as many different business improvement districts, merchants associations, neighborhood groups, and identifying where those opportunities might be. It's very common to be, we call our our deployment, our parking areas in the morning nests. So we have nests that are, our scooters are brought out to in the morning, and we have many merchants, hotels, the hospitality industry in particular, that make requests of us to put nests in front of their properties because they see the benefit then to connecting, let's say, hotel guests that can then easily get around town to see the sights of a city. And so we get requests all the time to create nests at designated locations around cities, and that's one way that we then kind of create those, focal points. But I would also say that we hear from many retailers and restaurants that are really excited about scooters to help create connectivity across town, and we're seeing an uptick in businesses, in some restaurants that are saying that, particularly during the weekday, employees that might only be able to have time to grab a quick bite to eat, a block or two from their office, they're now finding that they can get on a scooter, zip to the other side of town, and enjoy a meal at a restaurant in a neighborhood they might not normally have been able to get to during their lunch hour. So we're seeing a lot of synergies between kind of centers of employment and restaurants, and also the hospitality industry in general.
Are either of you seeing any data yet, sort of that support, those partnerships being effective, or is it still too early?
I would say, for us so far in Oakland, because we've been here for about 2 months, it's largely been anecdotal, and a lot of just feedback we get when we check in with local businesses and merchants associations. They're reporting back to us that they're seeing more scooter traffic, parked in front of their businesses. We haven't collected data, beyond the sort of anecdotal stuff at this point, but over time, as we're operating here longer, for sure.
Dave, you've been involved in bike advocacy for a long time here. As you mentioned, these vehicles could create sort of a point of a force, sort of a forcing mechanism to get the city to pay closer attention to bike infrastructure. What are the city's biggest, top maybe 2 needs right now related to creating safe spaces to actually ride these vehicles? I took a Bird scooter, just because it was right there. Sorry, Evie. Bird scooter from 12th Street BART to Jack London. It felt a little bit like taking my life into my own hands on Broadway right there. What are the top, maybe 2 or 3 needs that you see in Oakland infrastructure right now to make riders feel safe?
The number one reason it becomes challenging to put a bike lane on the street is the loss of parking.
Yeah.
And so if scooters can help us bring more business to businesses that otherwise they perceive get there by the car, that's going to help us. And of course, the second biggest challenge is taking away a lane of traffic on a street. Broadway has 2 lanes in each direction. If we brought it down to 1 with a protected bike lane, and you had bikes and scooters going up and down it all day, is that a net plus or minus for your business? Or if you live here, is that a net plus or minus to your neighborhood? Decide for yourself, as we all do with these projects. One thing I want to add to Marlo's comment is having the scooters is potentially not just beneficial to the businesses that may be a little bit further away, it also makes the streets a little further away safer. Mm-hmm. And it's because there are businesses that are on streets that don't have as much foot traffic. And the scooters now are bringing people to those streets. And as they do that, the businesses can benefit, but that street just got safer. I think San Pablo is a good example. If you just sort of head up San Pablo out of downtown Oakland, the foot traffic drops off, and particularly at night it drops off. If you can use a scooter to get up and down San Pablo Avenue, you can hit some of the businesses there, and we're making the streets safer. And that's not really Bird's job to document that. Maybe it's OCDOT's job to document it, but it's certainly my job to appreciate that the streets are getting better that way, and better still with a bike lane. Yeah. Right.
Are you optimistic that the city will be able to make changes to particularly the bike lane network, given the rise of these services?
I'm super optimistic. People see chaos with scooters, and I see some chaos too. But as an advocate, chaos does not equal a bad thing to me.
Sure.
It can be a bad thing. It can be a good thing. It could be a mix of things. Right. What I'm trying to say is some chaos is good.
Right.
It makes people slow down. It makes them pay attention. It makes them think a little bit more.
Right.
And that kind of chaos is good. Scooters have definitely disrupted our streets way more than critical mass has, way more than just gobs of bicyclists up on any street in the East Bay, perhaps outside of Market Street in San Francisco. And I'm jealous. I wish 20 years ago I could have created the same chaos and sort of call to action. We must do something. We must do something about all these crazy bicyclists out there.
Dave, if someone had given you $1 billion, you might have been able to figure it out. I don't know. I'm just
Talk to the wrong bankers.
Kirby, let's talk about a little bit about that chaos, because I think it is a balance that regulators across the country and really around the world. I mean, Lime and Bird are in Europe and Israel, and probably I think targeting Latin America, Asia. In Oakland, the ordinance that the council has put together talks a little bit about how do we figure out where these things should be parked. Should we create designated spaces for them, and how does the city administrator decide what to do about that? But these services are also free floating. People can park them anywhere. How do you thread that needle? How do you find that balance between orderliness and utility for users?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just to add on what Dave was saying, our infrastructure isn't necessarily adapted to this new mode of transportation, right? So only 4 or 5 months ago, almost nobody was riding a scooter in Oakland, right? And now there's thousands of people riding scooters in Oakland. So we need to make space for them, I think. And so the bike lane is where they belong. We're working on our bike plan right now, Let's Bike Oakland. I'd advise you all to check it out. It's really great. An extensive, community input process for that. And so we're working on our next generation of bike lanes in Oakland and our network of bike lanes in Oakland. So, as far as parking, right, so you want the scooters to be available when you need them. That's the really cool thing about them is that, you don't necessarily have to walk a quarter of a mile to a bike share station. There might be a scooter right outside your building where you work, and so you might be able to just grab one and take it exactly to where you live, your home, instead of, the closest bike share station to your home, which might, again, be a quarter mile away. So I think we want to find that balance of making sure they're well distributed, but also that the proper place to park them is clear and legible to everybody, so that it's clear that you're supposed to ride them in a bike lane, and there's a safe bike lane that's available for you to ride them in, and it's also clear where in the public right of way you're supposed to park them.
Do you think how do you make that clear? Because they're supposed to be parked in the furniture zone. How do people know what the furniture zone is? It's kind of hard to. A lot of people probably know what it is, but a lot of people probably don't. How do you make that clear to people?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways, and there's a lot of cities that are experimenting with this right now. And there's both in-app ways and in real-life ways. And so, if you think about a place like Bike Corral, an in-street bike corral, we have a number of these around the city of Oakland. That's a really great place to park a scooter. So maybe in our signage above the bike corral that has the bike symbol, maybe we can add the scooter symbol there too. And maybe, on our bike racks, there's, something like 1,600 bike racks in the city of Oakland, or maybe it's a lot more, I can't remember. But maybe we can paint a little, area around the bike rack that has a little scooter symbol or something, so that this is a proper location to park a scooter. Gotcha. But yeah, it's all to be determined. I think this is the kind of feedback that we want to get.
Okay. Marlo and Evie, I was hoping you guys could talk a little bit about sort of the different approaches that you're taking to the operations and maintenance of your systems. These are big, gargantuan tasks to manage these fleets. You all own these vehicles, and companies in the past with bikes and scooters have taken different employment models to the maintenance and charging. In New York, City Bike has a unionized workforce for that maintenance. Lyft and Scoot in San Francisco, as they're proposing scooters, have said they would employ full-time workers to charge and maintain fleets. I think both of your companies have sort of tried to experiment with independent contractor models. What's the potential economic development upside from a workforce standpoint for these services, and how do you sort of, how does your business work in that regard?
I'll take this one first. So a lot of my day-to-day work as the general manager for Lime Bay Area is operations, and specifically servicing these vehicles, deploying these vehicles, and making sure that they're safe for everyone to ride. We do have contractors, 1099, who will pick up the scooters and charge them and deploy them in the morning. But what differentiates us is we also have a local operations team who I hire and my operations managers in the Bay Area manage. And they are in charge of the maintenance. We do it all in-house, as well as charging, deploying, rebalancing. And what's been really wonderful about it is we're able to hire from the local community, which benefits the local economy. And specifically in Oakland, I've partnered with an organization called the Center for Employment Opportunities, which is a program that works with formerly incarcerated people to rehabilitate them and develop a long-term sustainable life to reduce recidivism rates. And a majority of my team comes from this service, and to see them have this opportunity to work, to bring a paycheck home for their family and reduce the chances of them returning to prison is really been wonderful. And they're able to spend, the money they make with us in the local community that they wouldn't necessarily get otherwise. And for us, it's a model that works because we're able to scale really quickly, but we're also able to offer a long-term sustainable solution for our company and the community.
Marla, can you touch on that a little bit?
Sure. So we have a similar model in that we hire local contractors in every community, every city where we operate. We call ours our chargers. And again, they take the scooters off the streets at night, they bring them home and charge them, perform maintenance, clean them, and then deploy in the morning. We also hire local contract employees as our mechanics. In every market where we operate, we have a full-time fleet coordinator that kind of manages the operations. And in addition to that, similar as Evie just said, we find that our charger communities are kind of fiercely loyal to this opportunity to supplement their income. So many interesting stories from our charger communities. There's a woman I was speaking with last week in San Jose who's on maternity leave, and she does this at night when her husband's home and her baby's sleeping, and it's been able to help them offset some of their living expenses. And lots of folks who maybe have challenges finding, traditional 9-to-5 employment that are looking for another way to supplement their income find this to be a really, really helpful employment tool. One thing that we're really focusing on in terms of our local employment in the markets we operate has to do with on-the-ground safety ambassador teams and sort of stewards of the sidewalks. That's become something that we're really focusing on to improve rider behavior, parking behavior. So we're starting to really staff up locally in our markets around these safety ambassador teams. And again, it's another opportunity to get more boots on the ground, more eyes on the streets, and particularly on the sidewalks, both offering more employment opportunities locally, but then also to really drive home the message of safe riding practices.
And I wanted to also ask Dave, because, I remember there was a book about the dot-com bubble back in the early 2000s, and the cover image was a Razor scooter. And I think sort of the emergence of these companies has sort of caused people to wonder, what are the viabilities of these systems and these companies? I'm just wondering, Dave, sort of whether you think this is a sustainable trend given what you've learned about these businesses. And I'd also love Marla and Evie to discuss a little bit about what they can say to people about sort of their business models in a way that would sort of explain that these are viable, especially to people that are counting on them, like residents and governments.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the business models, but I'm less interested in how sustainable it is, because I know we're not going to figure that out by throttling this back, shutting it down, or doing what San Francisco did and some other cities are doing. We're not even going to begin to figure it out if we all do what San Francisco did. So let's learn and figure out what can be a sustainable business model. What we don't know, and a lot of businesses learn, is what you know a month into your business or 6 months into your business or a year, it's different. And so you've got to go through that learning process. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. Our airline industry loses money every year, and we bail them out when we have to. The automotive industry, they lose money, and when they do, the government bails them out. Sustainable transportation business models is not what America's all about. We're just about our priorities and letting people figure things out. And so I'm not going to hold scooters to any higher standard than we do airlines, trains, or the very car that most people use.
That's a good point. I don't know if scooter bailouts will be a 2018 issue, but I mean you raise a really good point, and Lime, Evie, your company has Uber and Alphabet, Google's parent company, as investors. Bird, you've raised a lot of money from big Silicon Valley names. When you interact with, government relations, with governments, how do you explain the business model? How do you explain that you're going to be around in 5 years, 10 years? When I think policymakers are looking around at other cities and seeing dockless bike share companies fold up and run away. You guys have emerged as the biggest players, though. So how do you explain that?
Well, back to that Razor scooter piece. I mean, Razor scooter is still around. They actually are launching electric scooters and applied for one of the permits in San Francisco. For Lime, we've thought about our business model from top to bottom to be a sustainable long-term program where we're providing access to fun, affordable transit. And we do that by partnering with local community stakeholders with bid alliances, much like this one, and also working on, our own sustainability clause of getting our green certification and employing people here in the Bay Area, considering this is our hometown market. And for us, we have evolved. We originally were just a dockless bike share company. Now we are a multimodal company with scooters, Lime E, which are electric assist bikes, as well as pedal bikes. So we're always learning, we're always taking feedback, and we're always improving. And that is what guarantees long-term success, is listening to your consumer, listening to businesses in the community, and adjusting as you need.
Marlo, Bird was, of course, the original scooter company. And, as we've seen with Instagram and Snapchat, sometimes there's good copycats.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to actually echo what Dave was saying. We're still in our infancy with this. So the question of, the longevity and is this going to be a long-lasting mode of transportation? But this is still in its infancy. And I think one of the most satisfying aspects of being in government relations right now for Bird is working with different cities and this learning process that Dave mentioned. This is a learning process that is just beginning. And what we're finding with, months under our belt in more and more cities around the country, there are so many opportunities to connect cities. I'm having more and more kind of intercity relationships and conversations now forming between Memphis wants to talk to Portland, who wants to talk to Denver, who wants to talk to Salt Lake City. And it's fascinating to see how these cities are all kind of learning from each other and developing some sort of industry norms and best practices. So it tells me that this is going to be around, because when cities start to take note and want to talk to other cities about how to make this work and be a successful way to get people out of cars, it feels pretty real. And I also think just the fact that the conversations we're having now about how we allocate public space in the right-of-way, it's changing dramatically. The chaos that you mentioned, David, I mean, it's a very powerful thing that we're having these conversations. There was an article I just read the other day about maybe we need to rename bike lanes to something else, because they're not just bike lanes anymore. So we're thinking about how we're dedicating this asphalt, that has largely been devoted to cars for decades. And now we're thinking about other ways to get people around and how we need to reallocate that space. So that tells me that this isn't a trend, and it's pretty exciting.
All right, I think I want to open it up to your guys' questions. So let's... Are these in the order of the best ones, or? I was kidding.
There were a lot of questions about helmets and safety.
Great. Okay.
No reason to feel right here.
Great. Kerby, maybe you could. I don't think we totally got into this in much detail. So could you talk a little bit about sort of the policies that the city is proposing with the ordinance? Specifically, what's the high level details that people should know?
Well, the high level is that in order for a scooter company to operate in Oakland, they will need to obtain a scooter sharing permit, and that permit will have a whole host of requirements for their operations, everything from requiring insurance, liability, indemnification of the city, data sharing, making sure that they provide us real-time access to their data about their scooters, that they deploy their scooters in an equitable manner, so that's 50% in what the MTC calls communities of concern, that they make available ways to pay for the service that don't require a credit card or a smartphone, that they provide a low-income discount program. There's a whole host of stuff That's probably the high level, but basically it will allow us to have responsible regulation that's based on best practices from other cities around the country that will give us some sort of enforcement teeth to make sure that that we get the benefits of the scooters and address the legitimate concerns around their use. And one other key high level is that they promptly address complaints of improperly parked scooters. So we've already started that process. We've integrated scooters into our 311 system. So if anyone out there sees an improperly parked scooter, you can report that through SeeClickFix. Oak 311 is another name for it. And there's a scooter drop-down menu, and you can even select the company, and then we direct that complaint directly to them to address.
Let's talk a little bit about the sort of enforcement of some of the key laws around scooters. So you have a requirement that I believe is a California law that the people have to wear helmets, and they, I believe someone's asking a question, what's Bird and Lime doing to regulate the 18 and over rules for riding scooters? How are you guys thinking about enforcement of those rules as it pertains to helmets, 18 and up?
Is that for scooter operator?
Yeah.
So I'll start. So first of all, at Bird, we are really committed to safety. We're really making that kind of our number one priority. One of the things that we are very careful about is trying to prevent underage riders. So we do require that you scan your driver's license to verify that you are, in fact, 18 years of age or older. And then in our in-app messaging, as well as all of our other rider education materials and safety collateral that we distribute in our cities that we operate, we always emphasize wearing a helmet. We do helmet giveaways like everywhere and anywhere we can possibly do them. Whenever we launch in a city, we scour the city neighborhoods to do helmet giveaways in those early weeks to begin to get the message out. We often leave supplies of helmets at different, like Visit Oakland or hotels or other major employment centers, again, to ensure that helmet use is high. I think also in terms of age, one thing that we're starting to do more, particularly around underage riding, is outreach to schools and community groups or parent associations to make sure that parents and teachers and educators are aware that the rule for bird riders needs to be 18 or over. So as much outreach as we can do to folks to spread that message, that's what we're doing. But we do rely on the driver's license as our first line of verification of age.
You don't do the age verification in the Lime app, do you?
So in other cities, we do have the driver's license verification, but in Oakland, we do not have it because of an equity concern. Not everyone has access to a driver's license, can afford it, or go to the DMV and acquire one. And because we want to meet the equity concerns that are going to be forth in the permit regulations and serving a certain percentage of those communities of concern, we haven't implemented it here in Oakland just because we would like everyone to have access to a scooter.
That's an interesting difference. Kerby, I had this thought as I was riding my scooter over here. Is Jack London Square corridor considered a sidewalk, or are scooters allowed?
Well, according to state law, scooters should be in the bike lane if there is one. They're not allowed to ride on the sidewalk, and you're supposed to ride in the street unless the speed limit's over 25, I believe. Scooters are also allowed under the California Vehicle Code on mixed-use paths. So I'm not sure what that designation is of. There's a few different paths in Jack London Square, right? So this one, I'm sure they are allowed. It's more of a street. But yeah, generally anywhere that a bike is allowed, a scooter is allowed. That's sort of what I've noticed in the California Vehicle Code.
Yeah, we don't know what it is for this plaza out here, or?
I'm not sure the designation of this plaza. Okay. I would assume they are allowed.
Officially pedestrian, but I just saw a couple of cyclists ride by. It's nice wide road there.
I've never ridden my bike out there, ever.
Come on, who's the biggest Oakland land use nerd here? Come on. Someone's got to know this. All right.
It may be worth mentioning that there's a state law to change some of these things and bring the scooter regulations in line with the bike regulations, so you don't have to figure out which regulation is applying. It's the same.
Okay.
I don't think the governor has signed it yet.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, I don't think it had passed, but that is good to know. Kerby, in terms of, there's some questions here about enforcement of those rules around riding in the street, making sure you're 18 and up. The companies are going to varying degrees, try to do user education on those questions. Is the city prioritizing enforcement currently about those rules being broken, or are they kind of maybe waiting to see once there is a permitting structure in place, to police those things?
Yeah, I think we want to put as much onus on the operators as possible to ensure that people know what the rules are and that they follow the rules. We also want to, as I mentioned, make our infrastructure legible so that people just intuitively and naturally know the proper place to operate a scooter, and that means, we need a lot more bike lanes and safer bike lanes. In terms of enforcement, I think what we're looking at mostly is a sort of educational type of enforcement where we work with the business improvement districts and others who have people on the street as sort of ambassadors that can kind of gently guide people towards the proper facilities. In terms of OPD, they're very busy doing, very serious enforcement of very serious crimes. And so I think at this point, we want to let them focus on what they do best, which is addressing those much more serious crimes.
This is open to anyone who has strong feelings on the topic, but it's relevant particularly to, I think, Jack London Square, a neighborhood without a, sort of BART station here. I guess I would imagine this is important. How can dockless systems contribute more to neighborhood identity? So transit stations are always great, vehicles for placemaking. These are stationless systems by definition. Is there any role for parking hubs or other kind of mobility hubs to kind of help, I guess, with placemaking, and specifically Jack London Square, since we're here?
I'll jump in. So absolutely, I think anytime there are hubs of activity around tourist-related or employment centers or transit stations, anywhere where there are those hubs where the natural sort of ridership demands take people, on a scooter to their destination or to return to, those become those hubs of activity, absolutely. But in between those hubs where the rider gets their scooter to where they're going, one thing we're hearing a lot, people are telling us, our riders are saying that now that they're getting out of their cars and they're opting to use a scooter instead for that mile or two trip, their eyes are open. They're seeing their surroundings more. They're not enclosed in their automobile, distracted by their cup of coffee or, on their phone as they're driving. And they're suddenly seeing for the first time some of the small businesses or the little pocket park or the little details of a neighborhood that they might not have seen if they were in their car. And it's actually, people are wanting to now stop and explore the stops along the way that, again, if they were in their car, they might not have seen. So I think there's a tremendous amount of placemaking and kind of economic development opportunities as people get out of their cars and start relying on scooters more, because your eyes are open, you're looking around, you're taking it in at a very different speed than you would in a car without any of the distractions. When you're on a scooter, you can't have your phone or a cup of coffee. You've got to have both hands on that thing. So it's a different experience, and with that experience, I think people's eyes are being open to their neighborhoods.
Any other additions to that question?
I'll add that up at the 19th Street BART station the other day, I saw probably 30 or so scooters in the morning there that were clearly got there because somebody brought them there. They weren't set there by Bird or Lime in the morning. And you can just tell by how they were sort of lined up on the street. And so ODOT's going through a process of redesigning 20th Street right there at the 19th Street BART station. And 2 months ago, I bet they weren't thinking about where we're going to put 30 scooters every morning in this street redesign. And I'll bet you they're thinking about it now. And that could be a placemaking piece of this whole street redesign that they're doing.
Yeah. This is my own question. I think there's just one more after this, but I'm curious, like, sort of either from the companies or Dave as someone with a strong bike history, what are the hardware improvements that need to be made to these vehicles? Because there's these Lime and Bird scooters were generally sort of bought from Chinese manufacturers and have been essentially redesigned for sharing. what are the improvements that need to be made, I guess, in the next iterations? Evie?
So at Lime, actually, our scooters were designed and manufactured for us. They're not bought aftermarket.
You have some scooters also that were...
Currently not in the Bay Area.
Okay.
And we're always making hardware improvements to be sturdier, to be safer, and to have better longevity and battery life. And we listen to the feedback of our riders and the community stakeholders and the governments to always change that. We've already had several versions of our scooters out on the streets.
What are you looking to improve most?
Ooh.
Can't really do turn signals. I found that to be
Always want to improve safety, more visibility, as well as offering a better battery life and longevity to make longer trips than just shorter ones.
Yeah, and to keep the scooters deployed later into the evening, so that the people who pick them up and charge them don't have to come as early in the day.
Marlo, anything to add there?
I would actually say just the marrying of our technology to the hardware. So there are a lot of safety features that we're exploring right now in terms of our technology that we would like to marry to our actual vehicle, in terms of being aware if a scooter is on a sidewalk, there potential for technology to explore. If you're riding on a sidewalk surface where the scooter itself can detect the kind of pattern of maybe like the bricks on a sidewalk, that might then slow the speed down or send an in-app message to, please move to the bike lane. There are sort of other features around kind of, like I said, the technology that will then hopefully redirect riders to get off the sidewalks. Technology around parking properly, if a scooter is tipped over, sensory alerts. So those are the areas that we're exploring, is the marrying of the technology to the actual vehicle to ensure safer riding and parking practices.
And there's going to be a lot of interesting debate around the ordinance that the City Council is considering. Kerby, Dave, what are ways that people in this room can let their voice be heard besides just emailing their council member? What's sort of the way that you would recommend that they let their opinion be known about these scooters, love them or hate them?
I'll say one thing you can do is use them. Download the app, start using them, and you'll see how the companies communicate with you and how they're communicating with the other people out there who maybe are leaving the scooters in the wrong spot or using them in a crazy fashion. And so I see that I use all the scooter apps that are available in the East Bay for learning purposes only. And so I see how they're sending me messages. I see what happens on the screen. They both require me to take a photo of the scooter after I've parked it, so there's a record of my parking that scooter if necessary. So that's one thing. And then the city in the ordinance has a community outreach component. I think that's where the residents can say, here's what I would like to see scooter companies do in terms of outreach in the community. I really don't know the answer to that, but this is part of the ordinance that Oakland is going to require companies to do the outreach into a neighborhood before they deploy there. I'm sort of a fan of just deploy, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, go deploy somewhere else. But maybe community outreach to businesses or neighborhood groups at a higher level to kind of see what makes sense. And so that ordinance is still being considered, that piece of it's still being considered. And once the city council passes it, then OCDOT gets to write the details of what are we going to expect these companies to do when they go into a new area.
Yeah, that's a great summary, Dave. Yeah, so we definitely want to make available those opportunities for the public and the scooter share operators to directly interact, so that you can say, what are you looking for out of a scooter share program? What are your concerns? And they can react to that. In the meantime, while we're developing our legislation, you can email scootershare@oaklandca.net. That's sort of our new email that we created. That's sort of the funnel for all public comments about the scooter sharing ordinance. You can always get in touch with your council members. Councilmember Kaplan has been sort of leading the charge on the scooter ordinance. But yeah, and me, K. Olsen at oaklandnet.com.
And that's all the questions on the card. But we do have a little bit more time, Sablon. I don't know if you want to open it up.
We have one more question being transcribed, but if anyone wants to
Yeah, and then I can repeat. the question on the mic.
Roger raised his hand first.
Most of you know me, but I write Streets blog.
Love Streets blog.
And Dave knows this is a point of contention for me. Thank you very much. So Dave and Mike East Bay, and everyone's joining this charge now, are trying very hard to retrofit streets in Oakland to make them safer for bicycles. That will make them safer for scooters, and hopefully the two can enforce each other. But there's kind of a disconnect. Just down the street from here, there's thousands of units going in at a place called Brooklyn Basin. And rather than build a bike lane, they're building a little gutter pan with a stripe on it with the storm grates in the middle of it. This exactly the kind of thing that will wipe out a scooter. And I'm wondering, can our scooter companies help kind of get everybody on the same page with this? Because we have this weird sort of schizophrenia going on in our city.
If I can summarize it, can scooter companies essentially help, I guess, bridge the gap between what's actually being proposed now related to new surface level infrastructure to actually create good sort of roadways for bikes and scooters, essentially? How do you bridge that gap? Thank you.
So we bridge that gap through what's called our Save Our Sidewalks pledge, and we contribute $1 a day per vehicle that operates in a city to go towards building and improving bicycle infrastructure in the cities in which we operate. So we offer that contribution to each city. In some instances, the city finds that it's a bit cumbersome for them to they can receive the money, but they can't quickly and nimbly turn it around and spend it and implement on a project. So often cities will ask us to make that contribution to a nonprofit like Bike East Bay that might be able to more quickly implement some quick build protected bike lanes. So we're always looking to donate or to contribute those resources in a way to more quickly address bicycle infrastructure needs sooner rather than later. And that's how we hope to shine a light on the need for more bicycle infrastructure and contribute.
If I could add a little more clarity to my question there. Brooklyn Basin, it's not a money issue at all. Oakland's actually completely rebuilding the street right now.
Okay.
They're just rebuilding it without a protected bike lane. So it's strictly a bureaucratic ship of state's very hard to turn, I suppose.
I think similarly, we have a $1 a day donation program where Bike East Bay is one of our recipients, but also this component that the city is currently missing is data. And where do most of our trips occur, where do most of our trips end and begin can be really advantageous for when it comes to planning, when it comes to deciding what material the street is going to be made of and where protected bike lanes are going to be and aren't going to be, because you're able to see heat maps of where our rides occur.
I think what's just really interesting and baked into your question is these problems are not going to be solved overnight. Cities have been making bad, sort of infrastructure investments that maybe seem retrograde for a long time, right? And we're going to be living for at least a couple of years, maybe more, if these scooters do catch on, with kind of this mismatch between investment in infrastructure and investment in these companies. I just think will be a really interesting sort of development to watch. So we have a question on speed limits. What is the legal speed limit for these scooters, Kerby? And is there a technical speed limit, which I think means how fast can these scooters go, actually?
I like the California Vehicle Code quizzes here. I can't remember what the California Vehicle Code statute is on the speed limit of scooters. I don't know. I think each operator, sets their vehicles go a different speed. So I'll pass it over to them.
So I'll just say that our scooters, when they come out of the box, they're at 22 miles per hour, and we take all of our scooters down to 15 miles an hour, and we cap it at a 15 mile an hour speed limit.
Our scooters in Oakland currently go 17 miles per hour, which is just about as fast as I go on my person-powered bike. And we do have the availability to speed cap our scooters as well, which currently we do in San Jose at 12 miles per hour.
Gotcha. The last question is how to avoid a backlash and ban of these services that, like some cities have done with Lyft, Uber, and Airbnb, being forced from some cities, or there being strong regulation against them, like in New York, San Francisco, places like that. I think that would be a question for the people immediately to my three places to the left. These vehicles and these services have been controversial in a lot of cities. San Francisco, they're currently off the streets temporarily, and they've, your companies have racked up a decent number of cease and desist letters. How do you, I guess, sort of make better inroads with cities?
I'll start, by doing exactly what we're doing in Oakland, which is engaging from the get-go, being a part of the process from the beginning. The communications with the council member, with Rebecca Kaplan's office, as well as with ODOT, has been an open door since day one. We've been encouraged to be a collaborator and a partner in the process. And by having those open communications, providing feedback, listening to comments, questions, concerns, and being responsive, and we're doing this together, and it doesn't feel like there's any backlash in Oakland. It feels like it's been a really inclusive process, and in most cities. And I think, unfortunately, there's some narratives about kind of the cease and desist stuff that those are actually the outliers. And if you look at the cities where we operate throughout the country, throughout the world, in fact, scooters are operating incredibly successfully in solving last mile transportation problems in cities throughout the country. Cities are enjoying scooters for their residents. There's a lot of success stories that are now being shared amongst cities. And so I tend to shy away from that sort of cease and desist kind of storyline because in our experience, we're finding that our collaborative spirit with cities is generating a lot of success.
I'll go ahead and add, I think Oakland is the model for how to deal with this. It definitely helped that San Francisco overreacted. That taught Oakland how can we better react.
It's a common theme in Oakland, I feel like.
So get a city nearby to overreact and then do it right. To bless the system, work closely with the operators so that in the meantime, things aren't too out of control. Sure, there's people complaining in Oakland and everywhere about these, and sure, some people are getting hurt, no doubt. There are some impacts with any type of new mobility for sure. But as I've said before, I'll say again, I think the benefits outweigh that, and will continue to further outweigh that as we go forward and we get more of these things on the street. I think also Berkeley overreacted as well, as they often do to a lot of things. And I lived there for 15 years and experienced it. So it helped that Oakland's kind of bookend by two cities that perhaps overreact to these things. And under Kaplan's leadership, we tried to kind of thread the needle right between backlash. And there's going to be two kinds of backlash. I think if you now banned scooters in Oakland, you're going to get a backlash, and Bike East Bay is going to be part of that too. And if you just come in San Francisco style, you get the other end of the backlash. So I like what Oakland's doing, as you maybe can tell.
Just one thing to add from our end, speaking with, working collaboratively with governments, when they say we want this component, we want a speed cap, and we say, okay, we can do that, or we want you to meet this equity component, and we say, what is the goal of this equity component and how can we work with you? It's been really advantageous here in Oakland, and also working with local stakeholders and community organizations like Bike East Bay, and really becoming a part of the community and doing things like First Fridays. It's really just creating us to be a part of the experience in Oakland.
I think this is my last question, just because of where we're sitting, given a lot of the headlines we're reading about the new A's ballpark and their proposed gondola? Something like that. Have you guys had either of your companies had any discussions with the A's about potential transportation solutions to the Howard Terminal ballpark?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We've spoken with the A's for some partnerships, but can't comment directly on the new ballpark.
We can get a good news story out of this event. Great press for the Jack London Square Business District. All right.
If San Francisco hadn't overreacted, we would see how the Giants ballpark was working with scooters, but we don't know because they overreacted.
Yeah. Let's give, we have one question, maybe?
So I think, do I have to? Okay. So I think one of the issues with, we're required to ride on the sidewalks, but the streets in Oakland are pretty terrible with potholes. So is there anything that you guys are doing to address the potholes to make sure that people are safe when they're riding on the streets?
Yeah, and I'll just add on top of that, how are you improving the vehicles so that because if you were to ride on a bike, like a jump bike, you wouldn't feel the potholes quite as much as when you ride on the scooters. Come on, you know that's true.
One note, I recommend reporting all potholes through our Oak 311 system. You'd be surprised how fast they get filled.
Yeah. Oakland streets are not great. They're getting better. We've invested in repaving our streets. My experience has been you got to pay attention to the street. If you hit a big pothole on a scooter, I haven't done it yet. Hopefully I won't. Whereas on a bike, you can hit a pothole and sometimes everything's fine.
Yeah.
So you do have to pay attention. But this is the summer of repaving in Oakland. We're repaving all kinds of streets in this city, unlike we've done in the 20 years I've lived here.
It's going to be as famous as the Summer of Love in San Francisco.
There you go.
Summer of repaving.
Yeah, one more thing to add. We're repaving 3 times as many streets as we would in a normal summer this summer. So this is the summer of paving. There's a lot of streets out there getting repaved.
I didn't know this. I learned something. There we go.
I just want to thank the panel and thank you all. Thank you, Corey, for great moderation, and thank you all for your great questions and putting them in the hot seat and asking tough questions. It's our hope that Jack London will be well connected and full of life, and we're looking for all sorts of tools to get us there. And it's my hope that she'll never have to have a driver's license, and we'll have a plethora of transportation options.
Have you already had your autonomous vehicle event? That has to be next.
So thank you all. Let's hear it for the panel. Round of applause.